One moment, I was the director of the FBI, driving my classic car home. The next, a rogue cop had a gun to my head, and I knew my biggest case had just come looking for me. The setting sun bled across the horizon, painting the Virginia countryside in hues of orange and deep purple. It was the kind of evening that was supposed to wash away the stress of a long week in D.C. I had the windows down on my '68 Mustang, the rumble of the V8 a familiar comfort, the cool air a welcome relief after hours spent in sterile, soundproofed rooms. My name is Arthur Vance, and for the last 3 years I've been the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. But right then I was just a man driving his classic car home to his wife, looking forward to a weekend of blissful, bureaucratic silence. I'd just wrapped up the initial briefing on the Donovan case, a sprawling web of public corruption that reached so high it made my stomach churn. It was the kind of case that creates enemies in powerful places, the kind that keeps you up at night. I was looking forward to putting it out of my mind, at least until Monday. That's when I saw them. The flashing blue and red lights appeared in my rearview mirror like an angry hornet, sudden and aggressive. I glanced at my speedometer. 62 in a 55. A minor infraction, but an infraction nonetheless. Annoying, but routine. I sighed, easing the Mustang onto the gravel shoulder of the deserted two-lane road. I killed the engine, and the world fell quiet, save for the chirping of crickets and the crunch of boots on gravel approaching my driver's side door. I reached for the glove compartment to get my registration, my movements slow and deliberate. You never want to spook a police officer during a stop. Stay in the vehicle, hands on the steering wheel where I can see them. The voice was sharp, laced with an authority that felt theatrical, overly aggressive for a simple speeding ticket. I complied, placing my hands at 10 and 2. The officer, a tall, wiry man whose name tag read Miller, appeared at my window. His face was gaunt, his eyes wide and intense, pupils dilated despite the fading light. A red flag went up in the back of my mind. "Evening, officer," I said, my voice calm and even. Was I going a little too fast back there? He ignored my question, his flashlight beam dancing across the interior of my car before settling on my face, blinding me for a second. "License and registration." His tone was flat, impatient. I reached slowly into my jacket pocket. "Sure thing. They're right here." I pulled out my wallet, retrieving my driver's license. Tucked right behind it was my official identification. I handed both to him. He snatched them from my hand. I watched him as he looked at the driver's license, then flipped to the federal ID. His eyes scanned the card. Arthur Vance, Director, Federal Bureau of Investigation. This was usually the point where the entire tone of the interaction shifted. There'd be a moment of disbelief, followed by a stammered apology, and I'd be on my way with a polite warning to watch my speed. It had happened twice before in my tenure, but Officer Miller didn't apologize. A slow, chilling smirk spread across his lips. "Well, well, well," he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "Look what we have here. A big shot from D.C. playing dress-up. You think that's funny? You think flashing a fake ID is going to get you out of a ticket?" My blood ran cold. "Officer, that identification is real. I can assure you." "Shut your mouth," he snapped, his voice rising. "Get out of the car. Now." My training, decades of it, screamed at me. This was wrong. All of it. The pretext for the stop was flimsy, his demeanor was dangerously unstable, and his reaction to my credentials was inexplicable. This wasn't procedure. This was something else. But I also knew that arguing with an armed man who was clearly on edge was a fast track to a cemetery. I slowly opened the door and stepped out, my hands raised slightly to show I meant no harm. "Turn around, hands on the hood," he barked. I complied, placing my palms flat on the cool metal of my Mustang. The beautiful sunset I'd been admiring just minutes ago now seemed mocking, a beautiful backdrop to a scene spiraling into chaos. I could hear his heavy breathing behind me, the rustle of his uniform. I braced myself to be cuffed. Instead, I heard a metallic click that echoed in the sudden silence. It was a sound I knew intimately. The sound of a safety being disengaged. A cold, hard circle of steel pressed against the base of my skull. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my breathing remained steady. Panic was a luxury I couldn't afford. "You've been a very busy man, Director," Miller whispered, his voice a venomous hiss, right next to my ear. The sneer was gone, replaced by something far more terrifying. Cold, focused intent. Sticking your nose where it doesn't belong, making powerful people very, very unhappy. It hit me like a physical blow. This had nothing to do with my speed. This wasn't a random traffic stop. This was the Donovan case. It had to be. My mind raced, trying to calculate the odds, the angles. Who sent him? How did they know my route? I don't know what you're talking about, I said, my voice dangerously steady. He pressed the barrel of the gun harder into my temple, the pressure a brutal, undeniable reality. Don't play dumb with me. It won't end well for you. I'm not here to talk about the case file. I'm here for the package. The one you picked up from the drop this morning. A new wave of dread, colder and sharper than the first, washed over me. It was a dread born not of recognition, but of complete and utter confusion. Because I hadn't picked up any package. I hadn't been to any drop site. My entire morning had been spent in a secure facility in Quantico. This man, this rogue officer with a gun to my head, was operating on bad information. And I realized in that one freezing moment that he was going to kill me for something I didn't have. My mind, which seconds ago was a chaotic storm of fear, became unnervingly calm. The immediate threat of death has a way of clarifying things, stripping away the non-essential. I was no longer Arthur Vance, the husband looking forward to a quiet weekend. I was the director, and this officer, this man named Miller with the desperate eyes and the gun to my head, was now a hostile actor in a critical incident. My survival, and potentially the integrity of a massive federal investigation, depended on what I did in the next few minutes. Denying I had the package was a dead end. He wouldn't believe me. He couldn't believe me. His entire mission, possibly his own life, was predicated on the idea that I had it. My only option was to play his game, but on my terms. Okay, I said, letting out a slow, controlled breath. I kept my voice low, forcing him to lean in closer to hear me over the crickets. It was a small thing, but it changed the dynamic, drawing him into my space. Okay, the package. Let's talk about the package, but not like this. A car could come along at any moment. You want to have this conversation out here on the shoulder? I felt the barrel of the gun dig in slightly, a sign of his indecision. I was offering him a logical alternative, an appeal to his own self-preservation. Think about it, Miller. You and I both know who sent you. Do you really think they'll protect you if some random farmer with a cell phone records the FBI director being held at gunpoint by a local cop? You'll be the first loose end they tie up. Shut up, he hissed. But his voice lacked the conviction of before. A seed of doubt had been planted. Just tell me where it is. It's not in the car, I said, speaking to his reflection in the deep blue paint of my Mustang's hood. I could see him clearly now. The sweat beading on his forehead, the way his eyes kept darting towards the empty road behind us. He was spooked. He was an amateur. You think I'm an idiot. I wouldn't be caught dead with it on me. It's secure. But it's time-sensitive. If I don't check in, the contents are released. Everything. The names, the accounts, the whole damn network. Your employers go down. And you go down with them. It was a complete fabrication, a classic gambit from a dozen spy thrillers. But it was believable because it was exactly the kind of contingency someone in my position would arrange. I was banking on the fact that the people who sent Miller were paranoid and would have told him I was cunning. I was using their own narrative against them. His breathing hitched. You're lying. Am I? I let the question hang in the air. Look at me, Miller. Look at my face in the reflection. Do I look scared? Or do I look like a man who has all the leverage? You came for a package, but you walked into a dead man's switch. You can kill me. You'll probably get away with it for a day or two, but my death triggers the release. Your life as you know it is over. Or, you and I can find a way for you to walk away from this. Maybe even with a piece of what you were promised. I was walking a razor's edge. Offering him a way out could make him feel empowered, or it could make him panic and pull the trigger. I watched his eyes in the reflection. They flickered, the gears turning in his head. He was calculating his odds, and they weren't good. The people who sent him were powerful enough to target the director of the FBI. They were certainly powerful enough to eliminate a disposable pawn. What do you propose? He finally ground out, the pressure of the gun lessening by a fraction. It was the opening I needed. First, you're going to put that gun away, I said, my tone shifting from negotiator to commander. Then you're going to cuff me. You're going to put me in the back of your car. We're going to drive, and I'm going to explain to you just how badly you've been played. You're a loose cannon right now, Miller. I need you calm and focused if we're both going to get out of this. For a heart-stopping second, I thought he was going to refuse. I saw the muscles in his jaw clench. He was a cornered animal, and I was telling him to trust the hunter. But the logic, the sliver of hope I'd offered him, was too potent to ignore. Slowly, deliberately, He pulled the gun away from my head. The sudden absence of pressure was dizzying. "Turn around, slowly," he ordered. I did as he said, turning to face him. His eyes were still wild, but the immediate murderous intent was gone, replaced by a desperate, fearful confusion. He held his service weapon in one hand and a pair of cuffs in the other. He was rattled, his movements clumsy. As he moved to grab my left arm to cuff me, he made a critical mistake. For a single fleeting moment, to get a better grip on the cuffs, he shifted the gun from his dominant right hand to his left. It was an amateur's move, a fatal one. In that split second of transition, the weapon was momentarily less stable, his grip less certain. My training, honed over 20 years as a field agent before I ever sat behind a desk, took over. My body moved before my mind had even finished processing the opportunity. My left hand, which he was reaching for, shot out and clamped down on his wrist, locking his gun hand in place. Simultaneously, my right hand chopped down hard on his elbow, hyperextending the joint. He cried out in a pained gasp, his fingers spasming, his grip on the weapon failing. The gun clattered onto the gravel between us. The entire sequence took less than a second. Before he could even register what had happened, I swept his legs out from under him. He hit the ground hard, the air exploding from his lungs. I dropped a knee onto his chest, pinning him, my hand grabbing his own cuffs from his belt. He stared up at me, his face a mask of shock and agony, the last rays of sunlight glinting off the steel in my hand as I prepared to cuff him with his own restraints. And that's when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of another car door opening just behind me. I wasn't alone with him anymore. The sound froze me for a nanosecond, a cold spike of adrenaline piercing the victory I'd just snatched. Pinning Miller to the ground, I twisted my head, my eyes scanning the darkness behind me. A second patrol car, identical to Miller's, was parked about 30 yards back, its headlights off, its presence masked by the twilight and the high-pitched hum of my own senses. The driver's door was wide open, and standing there, silhouetted against the dying light, was another uniformed officer. He wasn't reaching for his radio. His hand was steady, his posture calm, and his service weapon was already drawn, leveled directly at my head. "That's far enough, Director," the second officer called out. His voice was different from Miller's, older, calmer, and infinitely more dangerous. It was the voice of a professional, not a jumpy amateur. "Let Officer Miller go, and kick the weapon over to me. Do it now." My strategic advantage had evaporated. I had one hostile neutralized, but another had me dead to rights. My own weapon was holstered under my jacket, a lifetime away. Miller, pinned beneath me, started to smirk, a wheezing, painful sound. "Looks like your dead man's switch just ran out of time," he rasped. I had to make a choice. If I complied, I was a hostage. If I didn't, I was dead. I slowly released my knee from Miller's chest and stood up, raising my hands to show they were empty. Miller scrambled to his feet, clutching his injured arm and glaring at me with pure hatred. "The weapon, Director," the second officer repeated, his voice unchanged. I nudged Miller's gun with the toe of my boot, sending it skittering across the gravel towards him. He never took his eyes off me. He was the real threat. Miller was just the muscle, the disposable asset. This man was the handler. "I assume you're not here to give me a ticket for littering," I said, my voice steady despite the thunderous beat of my heart. The second officer gestured with his gun towards the back of Miller's patrol car. "Get in. We're going for a ride." As he spoke, he moved forward, his steps measured, never breaking his aim. He was older, maybe in his early 50s, with a weathered face and cold gray eyes that looked like they'd seen everything and been impressed by nothing. His name tag read, Jennings. I glanced at Miller, who was now retrieving the gun I'd kicked away, his face contorted in a mask of pain and humiliation. This was a fragile situation. 2 armed men, one of them unstable and nursing a fresh grudge against me. "And where are we going, Officer Jennings?" I asked, buying time, trying to read the situation. "You'll know when we get there," Jennings said flatly. "Now move." There was no room for negotiation here. I walked to the back of the cruiser and waited as Miller, fumbling with his good hand, opened the door. The back of a patrol car is a cage, a point of no return. The moment that door closed, my ability to influence events would drop to nearly zero. I had to do something before that happened. As I bent down to get in, I deliberately stumbled, catching myself on the doorframe. It was a small, clumsy movement, but it gave me a crucial extra second. In that second, my eyes darted to the Mustang. The keys were still in the ignition. My phone was in the center console, but more importantly, there was the button, the one I'd had installed myself. A tiny, discreet button under the dash, right next to the hood release. Miller shoved me impatiently from behind. "Get in," he snarled. I collapsed into the back seat, the hard plastic unforgiving. The door slammed shut with a sickening finality, the lock clicking into place. Jennings got into the driver's seat while Miller, still cradling his arm, got in the passenger side. Jennings started the car, the engine rumbling to life. He didn't turn on the sirens or the flashing lights. He just pulled out onto the empty road, heading away from my home, deeper into the dark, rural countryside. "So what's the plan, gentlemen?" I asked, my voice echoing slightly in the confined space. "You going to ask me about this package all night?" Jennings glanced at me in the rearview mirror. His cold eyes met mine. "The plan has changed, Director, thanks to your little stunt back there. Our employers don't like complications. They don't like witnesses. And they certainly don't like federal agents who know how to fight back. You've made yourself a liability." The unspoken words hung in the air. A liability to be eliminated. My bluff about a dead man's switch had worked on Miller, the pawn. It wouldn't work on Jennings, the professional. He knew I was stalling. He knew there was no automatic data release. My gambit had bought me a few minutes, but it had also escalated the situation from a kidnapping to a probable execution. "You're making a mistake," I said, my voice low. "Whatever you think you know, whatever they told you, you're on the wrong side of this. You're throwing your lives away for nothing." Miller laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Look who's talking. You're the one in the cage, Director. You're the one who's about to disappear." We drove in silence for another 10 minutes, the road growing narrower, the trees closing in around us. The last vestiges of civilization disappeared. No houses, no streetlights. Just the twin beams of the headlights cutting a path through the oppressive darkness. My mind was racing, analyzing every option, every possibility, and coming up with nothing. I was trapped. Then Jennings slowed the car, turning down a dirt track that was barely visible from the main road. The cruiser bumped and jostled over the uneven ground. This was it, the kill zone. They were taking me somewhere isolated, somewhere my body wouldn't be found for days, if ever. Jennings pulled the car to a stop in a small clearing, surrounded by dense woods, and killed the engine. The only light was the pale glow of the moon filtering through the canopy. "All right, Director," Jennings said, turning in his seat to face me, the gun once again held steady in his hand. "End of the line. The conversation about the package is over. It seems it doesn't really matter anymore. Now, tell us one thing, just to satisfy my curiosity. How did you know?" "Know what?" I asked, my eyes darting around the dark interior, looking for anything, any tool, any weakness. "How did you know to activate your transponder?" he asked, a hint of professional curiosity in his voice. My blood turned to ice, my gambit when I'd stumbled getting into the car. He knew. He'd somehow seen me press the button. And then I understood. The slow drive, the trip to this isolated spot. It wasn't just to kill me. It was to wait, to see who would respond to my signal. They weren't just eliminating a threat. They were hunting. My distress call wasn't a call for help. It was bait. And I had just led my people into a trap. The clearing fell into a predatory silence, thick and suffocating. My own heartbeat sounded like a war drum in my ears. Jennings's question hung in the air, a chilling confirmation of my worst fear. My secret cavalry, the elite hostage rescue team I had signaled, wasn't coming to save me. They were flying into an ambush. These men weren't just rogue cops. They were part of something far more sophisticated, something that could anticipate the response protocols of the FBI itself. The Donovan case was even dirtier than I'd imagined. "You're mistaken," I said, my voice a low, steady lie. "I didn't activate any transponder. You're getting paranoid in your old age, Jennings." Jennings didn't even blink. He just gave a small, humorless smile. "We'll see. We have spotters on the main road. If any official-looking vehicles get within 5 miles of this location, our job gets simpler. We finish our business with you and fade back into the woods. They'll find your car on the highway and your body out here a week later. No witnesses, no loose ends." He glanced at his watch. "But if your friends are smart, they'll come quiet. By air, maybe. Which is why we picked this clearing. Very little cover." He was laying out his entire strategy, a display of arrogant confidence designed to break me. He wanted me to feel the full weight of my helplessness, to understand that my final act had been to condemn the very people I trusted. Miller, sitting in the passenger seat, shifted uncomfortably. His bravado was gone, replaced by the nervous energy of a man in over his head. Unlike Jennings, he hadn't signed up for a potential firefight with an FBI tactical team. He'd signed up to abduct one man. "Who are you people?" I asked, leaning forward as much as the cage would allow. "This isn't about a speeding ticket. This isn't even about the Donovan file, is it? This is something more." "You're a smart man, Director. You were getting too close," Jennings said, his voice dropping. "Not just to Donovan, but to his partners. People who value their privacy. People who have the resources to insure it. They knew you were building a case. They also knew you had a personal insurance policy, a copy of the sensitive files kept off-site, the package. They hired us to retrieve it and retire you. Simple as that. It clicked into place. The bad intel about a morning drop site. They thought I had a physical copy of my most sensitive files with me. It was a sloppy assumption, but it had put me in this car, in this clearing, miles from anywhere. My real insurance policy was a multi-encrypted data cache stored on a server in a different hemisphere, but telling him that now would only hasten my demise. "So you're just hired guns," I sneered, trying to find a crack in his professional armor. "Patriots for a paycheck. You sell out your badge, your oath, for a handful of blood money from some corrupt politician." Miller flinched, but Jennings's expression remained stone. "Don't lecture me about oaths, Director. I've seen what men like you do in Washington. The real corruption isn't on the street, it's in the corner offices you frequent. We're just sanitation workers, cleaning up a mess." The minutes stretched into an eternity. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig in the surrounding woods sent a jolt through my system. I was a tethered goat waiting for the tiger. Were my people coming? Had they received the signal? The transponder in my Mustang was a custom job, military grade. It sent a silent, encrypted burst to a dedicated satellite, routing directly to the Strategic Information and Operations Center at FBI headquarters. There was no doubt they'd received it. The question was how they would respond. Standard procedure for a potential kidnapping of a high-value target like myself involved caution, surveillance, and overwhelming force. Jennings was counting on the caution. He had set a trap, and he was patiently waiting for the prey to walk into it. Suddenly, a radio on Jennings's belt crackled to life. It wasn't a police radio. It was a small, military-style handset. A voice, distorted by static, spoke a single word. "Birdseye." Jennings's eyes narrowed. He keyed the mic. "Status? One bird, inbound from the southeast. No lights. Low altitude. ETA 3 minutes. My heart leapt. Birdseye. A helicopter. They were coming. They were coming fast and quiet, just as Jennings had predicted. But now he knew. He knew their vector, their ETA. Jennings looked at Miller. "It's time. Get him out of the car." His tone was crisp. All business. The waiting was over. Miller, looking pale and nervous, fumbled with the door lock. He clearly hadn't anticipated this. He opened my door, his gun wavering in his hand. "Out, now. Hands on your head." I stepped out of the car into the cool, damp night air. The faint, rhythmic thumping of rotor blades was just barely audible, a distant promise of salvation that now sounded like a funeral dirge. They were flying blind into a kill box. "On your knees, Director," Jennings commanded, stepping out of the driver's side, his own weapon now fitted with a suppressor. The long, black cylinder was a chillingly final statement of intent. I knelt on the damp earth, the smell of pine and decay filling my nostrils. This was the end of the road. They weren't going to wait for the helicopter to get closer. They were going to execute me and be gone before the HRT team even knew what was happening. They would find my body, and the trap would be sprung. Jennings walked over and stood directly in front of me, the silenced barrel of his gun pointed squarely at my forehead. His gray eyes were devoid of any emotion. He was just a man doing a job. "Nothing personal, Director," he said, his voice calm. "It's just business." I could hear the helicopter getting closer now, the thwump, thwump, thwump of the blades growing louder, more distinct. It was a Black Hawk, I could tell by the sound. My people, coming to save a man who was already dead. I closed my eyes, a lifetime of memories flashing before me. My wife's smile, the pride on my son's face at his graduation, the weight of the badge in my hand on my first day as an agent. And then, above the sound of the approaching chopper, a new sound cut through the night. It wasn't loud. It was a crisp, metallic ping. Jennings's eyes widened in sudden, absolute shock. A small, perfect red circle appeared on his forehead, exactly where his gun had been aimed at mine. He stood frozen for a second, a look of profound disbelief on his face, before collapsing to the ground like a marionette with its strings cut. Before Miller could even process what had happened, a second ping echoed from the trees, and he crumpled beside Jennings, his gun clattering on the ground. The clearing fell silent, save for the now deafening roar of the inbound helicopter. I stared at the two bodies, then looked into the pitch-black woods from where the shots had come, my mind reeling. My team was still at least a minute out. Whoever had just saved my life wasn't the FBI. The Black Hawk, a monstrous shadow against the moonlit clouds, roared overhead, its searchlight cutting a brilliant white cone through the darkness and illuminating the clearing in stark, surgical detail. I was still on my knees, caught between the two dead men, my mind struggling to reconcile the impossible. Two perfectly placed shots from an unseen shooter had saved my life in the final second. The precision, the timing, the sheer audacity of it. It wasn't the work of law enforcement. It was the work of a ghost. Figures in black tactical gear began fast roping from the hovering helicopter, their movements fluid and efficient. Within seconds, the clearing was swarming with my people, members of the elite hostage rescue team. They established a perimeter, their weapons scanning the dark tree line, their faces grim and focused. The team leader, a man I knew well named Agent Price, rushed to my side, helping me to my feet. "Director Vance, are you injured, sir?" he asked, his eyes quickly assessing me for wounds. "I'm fine, Price, I'm fine," I said, my voice hoarse. I got to my feet, my legs unsteady. I looked past him, into the woods where my savior had been. There was nothing, no sound, no movement, just the silent, watching trees. "Did you have a sniper in position?" Price gave me a confused look. "Sir, we just got here. Our Overwatch team is still moving into position on the ridge a half-mile out. They haven't fired a shot. We heard shots as we were coming in. We assumed it was them." He gestured to Miller and Jennings. "Who did this?" My blood ran cold. It confirmed my suspicion. It wasn't them. Someone else had been out here tonight. Someone who knew about the ambush. Someone who had been watching the entire time. The scene was quickly secured. Miller and Jennings were confirmed dead. Their cruiser was searched, their weapons bagged. As the tactical team did their work, I walked over to my Mustang, which my team had located on the side of the road, and driven down the dirt track. I pressed the small button under the dash again, deactivating the transponder. My mind was a whirlwind of questions. Who sent these men? And more importantly, who killed them? The answer, I suspected, lay not in the Donovan file, but in what the Donovan file was protecting. It was a sprawling case of public corruption, yes, but I'd always felt there was a shadow organization behind it, a puppet master pulling the strings of these corrupt officials. Jennings had called them partners, powerful people who valued their privacy. It seemed I had stumbled into a war I didn't fully understand, and tonight one of their enemies had decided I was more useful alive than dead. Back in D.C., the investigation moved at lightning speed. Within hours we had identified Jennings and Miller. Both were former special forces with impeccable records who'd taken early retirement and fallen off the grid a few years back, only to resurface as sheriff's deputies in that quiet Virginia county 3 months ago. They were plants, sleepers waiting for an assignment. Their financials led us to a labyrinth of shell corporations that, after days of non-stop work by our forensic accountants, led to a single source, a multinational private security firm called Aegis Global. Aegis was one of the most powerful and secretive private intelligence agencies in the world, run by a reclusive billionaire named Alistair Finch. Officially, they provided security for corporations and governments. Unofficially, they were a mercenary army, an intelligence service for hire that operated in the darkest corners of the globe. Finch was the shadow I had been looking for. He was Donovan's partner. Aegis was the entity pulling the strings. They had tried to silence me to protect their network, but that still left the biggest question. Who fired the shots? The answer came 2 weeks later, not through an official channel, but in a way that was as clandestine as the events of that night. I was working late in my office poring over the Aegis files, when my secure, encrypted laptop pinged with an incoming message on a ghost network I hadn't used in years. It was a dead-drop channel, a relic from my days in counterintelligence. There was no sender ID, just a single attached file. My hand trembled slightly as I clicked it open. It was a ballistics report, highly detailed, far more so than our own lab's preliminary findings. It identified the rounds used to kill Jennings and Miller. Custom-made tungsten core ammunition, fired from a rifle that didn't officially exist. But I recognized the weapon's signature. I had seen it once before, in a classified briefing about a decade ago. It was the preferred weapon of a legendary but unconfirmed CIA operative known only by the codename Echo, a man who was supposedly a myth, a boogeyman the agency used to scare its enemies. Attached to the report was a short, unsigned text message. Aegis has overstepped. Finch has become a liability, not just to you, but to us. We cannot act directly, but we can provide tools to those who can. The package they were looking for? They were right. You do have it now. Below the text was a key, a decryption key. I typed it into a locked partition on the Aegis file we'd seized. Instantly, terabytes of data began to unspool. It was everything. Aegis's entire black ledger. Illegal operations, assassinations, political manipulations, a complete list of their assets inside the U.S. government, including a half-dozen senators and 2 cabinet members. It was the kind of file that could bring down governments. It was the real package. I finally understood. I hadn't been saved by an angel. I'd been armed by a rival power. Another clandestine group, likely from within the U.S. intelligence community, had been waging a shadow war with Finch's Aegis. They couldn't risk a direct confrontation, but they saw me as the perfect weapon. They let the kidnapping play out, waited until the last possible second, and then intervened, eliminating Finch's men and anonymously handing me the evidence I needed to dismantle his entire empire. I was a pawn in their game, but they had just handed me the power to become a queen. The next morning, I initiated the largest, most secretive joint operation in the Bureau's history. Over the next 48 hours, federal agents conducted coordinated raids in 17 cities. Senators were arrested on the steps of the Capitol. Aegis Global's headquarters was seized. Alistair Finch was apprehended trying to flee the country on his private jet. The fallout was immense, a political earthquake that shook Washington to its core. I never found out for sure who Echo was. I never received another message on that ghost channel. But sometimes when I'm driving home on that same stretch of Virginia Road, I'll look at the setting sun and think about the unseen forces that move in the shadows. I had been pulled over, held at gunpoint, and nearly executed. But that officer, Miller, and his commander, Jennings, didn't just end up in a morgue that night. Their actions, intended to bury a secret, ended up exposing a vast conspiracy and putting their masters in jail for the rest of their lives. And all because, for one brief, terrifying moment, my enemies and my saviors had a common interest, keeping me alive.